Sometimes the smallest voices speak the biggest truths. We've all been there trusting someone completely, only to wonder if we've been blind all along. Marcus Hale had worked with his lawyer Edwin Grant for 20 years. Every land deal, every contract, every major decision went through Edwin's hands. Then one afternoon, 8-year-old Sophie tugged on Marcus's coat outside the courthouse. "That lawyer faked my dad's papers," she whispered. "He's a fraud." Marcus froze. This little girl remembered things, dates, signatures, conversations her father had with Edwin, things that didn't add up. Now Marcus faced a terrible question. Had his trusted lawyer been stealing from everyone in town, including him? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Marcus Hale stood in the courthouse parking lot, watching Sophie's small figure disappear around the corner with her mother. The child's words echoed in his mind like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. 20 years. That's how long he'd known Edwin Grant, how long he'd trusted him with everything that mattered. The memory came unbidden. That first meeting in 1985. Marcus had been 35 then, a contractor with big dreams and calloused hands, sitting across from the smooth-talking lawyer in a downtown office that smelled of leather and ambition. Edwin had leaned back in his chair, confident and reassuring. "You build them. I'll handle the paperwork," he'd said with that easy smile. "Together, we'll build an empire." And they had. From single-family homes to apartment complexes, from strip malls to office buildings, Marcus had constructed half the commercial real estate in Millbrook County. Every acquisition, every permit, every dispute, Edwin handled it all. The man had a gift for making complex legal matters seem simple, for finding opportunities where others saw obstacles. Marcus climbed into his Cadillac, his hands trembling slightly as he gripped the steering wheel. The original partnership agreement was still in his office safe, yellowed with age, but sacred as scripture. They'd started with handshakes more than contracts, with trust more than paperwork. That's how business was done then, at least among men who looked each other in the eye and meant what they said. The drive home took him past his accomplishments, the Riverside Shopping Center, the Medical Arts Building, the senior living community that had won architectural awards. Each one represented not just his vision and sweat, but Edwin's legal expertise navigating zoning boards, environmental regulations, and property disputes. How many times had Edwin pulled off the impossible, finding loopholes or negotiating settlements that saved deals everyone else thought were dead? At 75, Marcus had been thinking about legacy lately. His wife Margaret had passed 3 years ago. His children lived in distant cities with their own lives. The business was his life's work, and he'd planned to establish a foundation, maybe build affordable housing for young families. Edwin was drawing up the papers for that too, but now sitting in his driveway, staring at the house Margaret had made a home, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in decades' doubt. Not the kind that came with risky investments or market downturns, but something deeper. Sophie's eyes had been so certain, so troubled. Children didn't make up such specific lies. He thought about Edwin's office, all mahogany and Persian rugs, the pictures of his yacht, his winter home in Florida. Success, certainly, but had there been signs? The times Edwin had rushed him through signatures, saying the details were just formalities. The occasional discrepancy Edwin explained away with legal jargon. Marcus didn't quite follow, but accepted because that's what trust meant. Marcus pulled out his phone, then put it back. Who would he call? What would he say? That an 8-year-old girl had made him question his oldest business relationship? He needed to think, to be sure. Because if Sophie was right, if even a fraction of what she suggested was true, then everything he'd built stood on a foundation of sand. The next morning, Marcus found himself parked outside Riverside Elementary School. He'd told himself he was just driving by, but here he was, watching parents drop off their children, searching for a particular small figure with dark braids. Sophie Martinez lived 3 houses down from Marcus, in a modest ranch home that had seen better days. He'd noticed the for sale sign go up 6 months ago, then the foreclosure notice that replaced it. The Martinez family had owned Riverside Hardware for 2 generations, a fixture in town. The place where contractors like Marcus had bought their first tools as apprentices. He spotted her then, walking slowly beside her mother, Carmen. The woman's shoulders sagged with a weight that had nothing to do with the backpack she carried for her daughter. Sophie looked up at her mother, said something that made Carmen attempt to smile, and kissed her goodbye at the school entrance. Marcus waited until Carmen had driven away before approaching. "Mrs. Martinez?" Carmen turned, her eyes wary until she recognized him. "Mr. Hale, I'm sorry about Sophie yesterday. She shouldn't have bothered you with our troubles." "She didn't bother me," Marcus said carefully. "In fact, I'd like to understand what she meant about the papers." Carmen's face tightened. "Sophie remembers everything. It's a gift and a curse. She can tell you what she had for breakfast on her 4th birthday, what dress I wore to her kindergarten graduation. Every conversation, every detail." She glanced around nervously. "She was there when we met with Mr. Grant about saving the store. She heard things, saw things." "What kind of things?" Carmen pulled her coat tighter despite the warm morning. "The foreclosure documents. Sophie insisted the signatures were wrong. She said Daddy always made his R different, and the dates didn't match when he was actually in the office. Mr. Grant said she was confused, that children don't understand legal matters." Her voice dropped. "But Sophie doesn't get confused about what she's seen." Marcus felt his chest tighten. "Did you try to fight it?" "With what?" "We'd already paid Mr. Grant's retainer everything we had scraped together. He said there was nothing he could do, that the bank documents were ironclad." Tears gathered in her eyes. "Roberto built that business with his father. 30 years of serving this community, and it was gone in 3 months. Why did Sophie tell me specifically?" Carmen managed a sad smile. "She sees you as someone powerful, someone who could do something. She's watched you from our yard, building things, making things happen. And," she hesitated, "she said she saw your papers in Mr. Grant's office when we were there. Lots of them. She was worried about you, too." Marcus reached into his wallet, pulled out a business card. "If you remember anything else, or if Sophie does, please call me. And Mrs. Martinez, be careful who you talk to about this." As he walked back to his car, Marcus noticed his hands were steady now. The doubt from yesterday had crystallized into something harder, sharper. A child with perfect memory had seen something wrong, something that had cost a family their legacy. And apparently, she'd seen his name mixed up in whatever Edwin was doing. It was time to look closer at his own papers. The forged deed lay on Marcus's desk like a coiled snake. He'd spent the last 2 hours comparing signatures, using a magnifying glass Margaret had given him for reading blueprints. The differences were subtle but undeniable. His authentic signature had a distinctive loop in the capital M, a quick slash through the H. This forgery was close someone had practiced, but the proportions were wrong. The pen pressure too uniform. Marcus pulled out his phone and photographed every page. Then did something he hadn't done in years. He opened the wall safe behind Margaret's portrait. Inside, among her jewelry and their important papers, he placed the forged deed and his notes. If something happened to him, someone would find them. The Carnegie Library wasn't just any property. It represented a promise to Margaret, whispered in her final days when she worried about being forgotten. "Build something that lasts," she'd said. "Something that helps people." The old library, with its limestone columns and reading rooms, would have been perfect. Now, according to this document, It belonged to E.G. Investments. Marcus drove to the county recorder's office as soon as it opened. The clerk, Janet, had been there 30 years and greeted him warmly. "Mr. Hale, haven't seen you in person for ages. Mr. Grant usually handles all your filings. I like to check on things myself sometimes," Marcus said, keeping his voice casual. "Could you pull the records for the Carnegie Library property? Parcel 447B. Janet's fingers flew over her keyboard. "Let's see. Yes, here we are. Latest transaction, recorded 3 months ago. Transfer from Marcus Hale Properties to E.G. Investments, LLC. Could I see the original filing?" She printed the record and handed it over. It was identical to what he'd found in his files, complete with the forged signature. But there was more. A second document attached, showing E.G. Investments had immediately taken out a $350,000 mortgage on the property. "Janet, who filed these documents?" She checked her screen. "Mr. Grant's office, like always." His paralegal, Helen Winters, brought them in. She leaned forward conspiratorially. "Between you and me, that girl always looks nervous. Sweet thing, but jumpy as a cat." Marcus thanked her and left, his mind racing. In his car, he pulled up property records on his phone. E.G. Investments had been busy. In the last 18 months, they'd acquired 6 properties in Millbrook County, all at below-market prices, all from owners who'd been Edwin's clients. The pattern was clear. Now Edwin wasn't just stealing from him. This was systematic. He needed to know more about E.G. Investments. The state business registry showed it was a limited liability company. Registered address, matching Edwin's office building. The registered agent was listed as E. Grant. Not even trying to hide it, Marcus felt rage building in his chest, kind he hadn't experienced since a contractor had tried to pass off substandard concrete in one of his buildings 40 years ago. But this was different. This was personal. This was betrayal by someone he'd invited to his home, who'd attended Margaret's funeral, who'd stood beside him through decades of business. The scope of it staggered him. If Edwin had stolen the Carnegie Library, what else? Marcus drove to 3 other properties he owned, or thought he owned. At each one, he found new for lease signs with E.G. Investments contact information. Properties that should have been generating income for his estate, for the foundation he'd planned, were lining Edwin's pockets. By afternoon, Marcus had confirmed at least $3 million in stolen property. And that was just what he could verify. Quickly, how many other forged documents were waiting in filing cabinets and databases? How many other clients had been robbed? He thought about confronting Edwin directly, imagined walking into that mahogany office and demanding answers. But no, Edwin was too smart, too connected. He'd deny everything, destroy evidence, maybe even turn the accusations around. Marcus had seen him in court, smooth and persuasive, making juries believe whatever story he spun. Standing in the parking lot of what used to be his warehouse, Marcus made a decision. He couldn't do this alone. He needed allies, people who understood the legal system but weren't part of Edwin's network. He needed evidence that would stand up in court, and he needed to protect others from becoming victims. Sophie Martinez's face flashed in his mind. That little girl had risked Edwin's anger to warn him. How many others had suffered in silence? How many families like the Martinezes had lost everything while trusting the very man who was robbing them? Marcus looked at his hands builders. Hands, honest hands that had created instead of stolen. At 75, he should have been enjoying retirement, not uncovering a massive fraud. But Margaret would have expected him to fight, to protect their legacy and their community. He pulled out the business card for David Pearson, the new district attorney who'd run on a platform of fighting corruption. It was time to make some calls, but first he'd stop by the Riverside Hardware building, now empty and for sale. If Edwin had stolen from the Martinezes too, their documents might reveal more about his methods. The comfortable world Marcus had built over decades was crumbling, but from its ruins, he'd build a case for justice. Edwin Grant had made a crucial mistake. He'd gotten greedy enough to steal from someone with the resources and determination to fight back. The war for Millbrook County's future had begun. Helen Winters was eating a sad desk salad when Marcus Hale walked into the law office's break room. She nearly choked on a cherry tomato, her eyes darting to the door like a trapped animal seeking escape. "Miss Winters," Marcus said gently, closing the door behind him. "I think we need to talk." "Mr. Grant is in court today," Helen stammered, already half standing. "I can take a message. I'm not here to see Edwin." Marcus pulled out a chair across from her, moving slowly, as if approaching a spooked horse. "I'm here because I think you know something's wrong, and you're the only person in this office I might be able to trust." Helen's hands trembled as she set down her plastic fork. She was younger than Marcus had realized, maybe 30, with prematurely gray streaks in her brown hair and worry lines that belonged on someone twice her age. "I don't know what you mean," she whispered, but her eyes said otherwise. Marcus placed the forged Carnegie Library deed on the table between them. "I never signed this." "But you filed it at the courthouse 3 months ago." Helen's face went white. She stared at the document as if it might bite her, then suddenly buried her face in her hands. "Oh, God. Oh, God. I knew this would happen." "Helen." Marcus kept his voice steady, though his heart was racing. "I'm not here to get you in trouble. I think Edwin's been using you, just like he's been using everyone else. But I need your help to stop him." She looked up, tears streaming down her face. "You don't understand. He has everything documented to look like I did it all. Every filing, every notarization my name is on them. If this comes out, I'll go to prison. I'll lose my license. My daughter," she broke off, sobbing. Marcus handed her his handkerchief, a gesture from another era that seemed to steady her. "Tell me what happened, from the beginning." Helen's story came out in fits and starts. She'd started working for Edwin 5 years ago, fresh from paralegal school, a single mother grateful for a good job. At first, everything seemed normal. Then Edwin began asking her to file documents without letting her review them properly. Standard forms, he'd say, no need to waste time. "About 2 years ago," Helen continued, her voice stronger now, "I noticed discrepancies. Signatures that didn't look quite right. Dates that didn't match the office calendar. When I asked about it, Edwin said I was too detail-oriented, that I needed to trust his judgment." She stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "But I couldn't stop noticing things. Clients coming in confused about properties they thought they owned. Eddie, Mr. Grant, always had explanations. Misunderstandings, he said. Paperwork mix-ups he'd resolve. "So you started keeping records?" Marcus guessed. Helen turned, surprise flickering across her face. "How did you—" Yes, I did." She moved to her desk, reached behind a drawer, and pulled out a thick manila envelope, copies of everything that felt wrong. "I told myself I was being paranoid, but—" Marcus opened the envelope, his heart sinking as he flipped through the contents. Dozens of documents, all with questionable signatures, suspicious transfers, properties changing hands for fractions of their value. The Martinez family's hardware store was there, along with at least 20 other victims. "This is evidence of massive fraud," Marcus said quietly. "Helen, with this, we can stop him." "No." Helen grabbed the papers back. "You don't understand. Edwin has connections everywhere. The sheriff's department, the mayor's office, even judges. He's told me stories, things he's done to people who crossed him. I have a 6-year-old daughter, Mr. Hawley. I can't risk." "What if I could guarantee your safety?" Marcus interrupted. "Protection for you and your daughter. Immunity from prosecution. A new job afterward. Somewhere safe." Helen laughed bitterly. "You can't guarantee that. You're just one man, even if you are rich. Edwin has been building his network for decades." Marcus leaned forward. I'm not just one man. I'm gathering others people Edwin has hurt, people who want justice. And I have connections too, Helen, clean ones. The new district attorney, federal contacts from my construction days. But I need someone inside Edwin's operation. I need you. Helen stared at him for a long moment, conflict written across her face. Finally, she whispered, "My daughter Emma has been asking why Mommy cries at night. I tell her it's just bad dreams." She squared her shoulders. "I don't want her growing up in a world where men like Edwin Grant can destroy families without consequences." "Then help me build a case he can't escape," Marcus said. "Help me protect not just your daughter, but all the children whose parents Edwin has robbed." Helen nodded slowly, fear and determination warring in her eyes. "What do you need me to do?" Marcus smiled for the first time in days. "First, we make copies of everything. Then, we need to find someone who understands the law well enough to help us use it. Do you know any judges Edwin doesn't own?" "Maybe," Helen said, a ghost of hope in her voice. "Judge Morrison. He retired last year, but Edwin always avoided his courtroom. Said the old man was too unpredictable." "Perfect," Marcus said. "An unpredictable judge is exactly what we need." Judge William Morrison lived in a Victorian house at the edge of town, where he could be found most afternoons on his wraparound porch, working through crossword puzzles or chess problems. At 82, his mind remained sharp as the gavel he'd wielded for 30 years on the bench. Marcus climbed the porch steps, a box of documents under one arm, Helen following nervously behind. The judge looked up from his chessboard, his keen gray eyes taking in his visitors. "Marcus Hale," Judge Morrison said, setting down a knight. "Haven't seen you since the county courthouse renovation. And Miss Winters, you used to file briefs. In my court, still working for that Peacock grant?" "Wait," Judge Morrison commanded. "This could be a trap. If Edwin's suspicious, going there plays into his hands." "That's why we're here, Your Honor," Marcus said. "We need your help." The judge gestured to wicker chairs. "I'm retired, Mr. Hale. I do puzzles now, not cases." "This is a puzzle," Marcus replied, setting the box on the table. "One that involves systematic fraud, forged documents, and stolen properties worth millions." Judge Morrison's expression didn't change, but his hand stilled over the chessboard. "That's a serious accusation. I assume you're not making it lightly." For the next hour, Marcus and Helen laid out the evidence. The judge listened without interruption, occasionally pulling reading glasses from his shirt pocket to examine a document more closely. His face remained impassive, but Marcus noticed his jaw tightening as the scope of the fraud became clear. When they finished, Judge Morrison leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "In my 30 years on the bench, I've seen all manner of human greed and betrayal, but this," he shook his head, "this is sophisticated, elegant even in its maliciousness. Can you help us?" Helen asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Judge studied her for a moment. "Miss Winters, are you prepared for what fighting this will mean? Edwin Grant didn't build his empire by being careless. He'll come at you with everything he has. He's already taken everything from so many people," Helen replied, finding strength she didn't know she had. "Someone has to stop him." Judge Morrison stood, moving to a bookshelf visible through the open French doors. He returned with several dusty legal volumes. 20 years ago, I presided over a similar case. Smaller scale, but the same pattern. A lawyer named Richardson was dispersing client funds into shell companies. We got him on mail fraud, eventually. "What happened to him?" Marcus asked. 15 years in federal prison. "Died there." The judge's voice was matter of fact. "But Grant has learned from others' mistakes. These documents are crafted to provide plausible deniability. He can claim clerical errors, miscommunication, client confusion. So we can't stop him?" Helen's shoulders sagged. "I didn't say that." Judge Morrison pulled out a legal pad, his handwriting still precise despite his age. But we need more than forged documents. We need a pattern that shows intent. We need witnesses willing to testify. And most importantly, we need to catch him in the act. He began sketching a diagram. The shell companies are key. E.g. Investments. It's too obvious he's getting cocky. But I'd bet there are others, layered to hide money flow. Miss Winters, can you access his computer files? Helen nodded reluctantly. He's paranoid about passwords, but I know where he keeps them written down. Old school. Good. We need transaction records, bank statements, correspondence. The judge turned to Marcus. You mentioned the new district attorney, David Pearson? Yes. He ran on an anti-corruption platform. I mentored him when he was a young prosecutor. Good man, but he'll need federal support for something this big. I still have contacts at the FBI's White-Collar Crime Division. Judge Morrison smiled grimly. Turns out they remember judges who gave them fair hearings. He stood, energy crackling through his elderly frame. If we're doing this, we do it right. No shortcuts, no vigilante justice. We build a case so airtight that no amount of legal maneuvering can break it. What about the victims? Marcus asked. The families who've already lost everything? Document everything. Get affidavits if you can, but carefully. If Grant gets wind of this too early, evidence will disappear. The judge fixed them both with a stern gaze. From this moment on, assume you're being watched. Trust no one outside this circle, and Miss Winters, start looking for a new job. Once this breaks, you can't stay at that firm. Helen paled but nodded. I understand. Judge Morrison walked them to the door, his bearing suddenly resembling the formidable presence he'd been in court. Mr. Hale, you asked if I could help. I can do better than that. I can teach you how to fight this war. Because make no mistake, that's what this is. Edwin Grant declared war on this community's trust. Time we fought back. As they drove away, Marcus felt something he hadn't experienced in days. Hope. They had a judge who understood the law, a paralegal inside the operation, and growing evidence. Now they needed to be smart, careful, and patient. The chess master had joined their game. The war room, as Judge Morrison called it, was set up in Marcus's dining room. Papers covered every surface, connected by colored strings like a detective's evidence board. Helen had been copying files for a week, staying late at the office, her nerves fraying with each stolen document. I found them, Helen announced, placing a stack of incorporation papers on the table. 7 shell companies, all registered in Delaware. E.g. Investments is just the tip. Sophie Martinez sat at the far end of the table, brought in by her mother after school. The 8-year-old studied each document with intense concentration, her photographic memory cataloging every detail. That one, Sophie pointed to a signature. I saw Mr. Grant practice that name in his office. He had a whole notebook of different signatures. Judge Morrison leaned forward. You saw him practicing signatures? Sophie nodded solemnly. When Daddy was talking to him about our store, Mr. Grant left his desk drawer open. I saw the notebook. He was writing Robert Martinez over and over, but each one looked a little different. Carmen Martinez squeezed her daughter's hand. She tried to tell us then, but we thought she was just anxious about losing the store. Marcus traced the web of companies on their chart. So we have E.g. Investments, Millbrook Holdings, Riverside Partners, County Development Group, Heritage Properties, Summit Ventures, and Prairie Land Trust, all registered within the last 3 years, all with variations of Edwin's signature as registered agent. But look at this. Helen spread out bank records she'd photographed. The money doesn't stay in these companies. It flows through them like water, always ending up in accounts registered to Legal Services Trust. Classic money laundering. Judge Morrison muttered, but sophisticated. He's not just stealing properties. He's washing the profits through multiple entities to hide the trail. Marcus's phone buzzed. David Pearson, the district attorney, was finally returning his calls. He stepped onto the porch for privacy. "Mr. Hale, I've reviewed the preliminary evidence you sent." Pearson's voice was cautious. "It's concerning, but I need more before I can open a formal investigation. Edwin Grant has powerful friends." "How much more?" Marcus tried to keep frustration from his voice. "A direct link between Grant and these forgeries. Right now, a good defense attorney could claim independent bad actors, frame Helen Winters, create reasonable doubt." Marcus returned to the war room, relaying the conversation. Helen went pale at the mention of being framed, but Judge Morrison just nodded thoughtfully. "He's right. We need Edwin's direct involvement." The judge turned to Helen. "The computer. Records. Is there correspondence? Emails. Instructions to forge?" "He's careful," Helen said. "Most instructions are verbal." But she hesitated, then pulled out her phone. "I've been recording our conversations for the last month. Is that legal?" "Judge." Morrison smiled. "Illinois is a two-party consent state, but there's an exception for evidence of criminal activity. Play them." Helen's recordings were damning. Edwin's voice, smooth and confident, instructing her to adjust dates on documents, to file papers without proper review, to handle signature discrepancies. "That's good," the judge said, "but we need him explicitly acknowledging the forgeries. Helen, can you get him to discuss specific properties?" Before Helen could answer, Sophie tugged on Marcus's sleeve. "Mr. Hale, I remember something else. When Mr. Grant took our store, he had a meeting with another man. They talked about the big fish and laughed. The other man said something about, when we get Hale's portfolio, we can retire to the Cayman Islands." The room went silent. Marcus felt ice in his veins. "Can you describe this other man?" Sophie closed her eyes, her recall perfect. Tall, bald, wearing a dark blue suit with a red tie. He had a gold watch and a ring with a big ruby. Mr. Grant called him Tom. Helen gasped. "Thomas Brennan. He's the president of First National Bank." The pieces clicked into place. The foreclosures, the loans against stolen properties, the shell companies. It wasn't just Edwin. This was a conspiracy involving the town's largest financial institution. Judge Morrison stood slowly. "This changes everything. Bank fraud crosses state lines, brings in federal jurisdiction. We're not just dealing with a corrupt lawyer anymore." Marcus thought of all the families who'd lost homes and businesses through First National foreclosures. How many were legitimate? How many were orchestrated to feed this scheme? "We need the FBI now," the judge declared. "This is beyond what local law enforcement can handle." "Helen, how quickly can you copy Grant's files on First National?" "Give me 2 days," Helen said, determination replacing fear. "I'll get everything." Marcus looked around the table at his unlikely team. A traumatized paralegal, a retired judge, a little girl with perfect memory, and a family who'd lost everything. David facing Goliath seemed like better odds, but they had truth on their side. And sometimes that was enough. The list of victims filled 3 whiteboards in Marcus's dining room. 47 families, their stories written in Helen's neat handwriting, each one a testament to systematic destruction. The Martinez family was just one entry among dozens, who'd lost homes, businesses, and life savings. Sophie looked at the adults' stricken faces and stood up. "My teacher says bullies get meaner when they're scared. Mr. Grant is scared now. That means we're winning, right?" Out of the mouths of babes, Marcus thought. The 8-year-old was right. Edwin's desperation meant they were close. "She's right," Judge Morrison declared. "He's making mistakes. Threatening witnesses, destroying evidence. These are crimes in themselves. We may have lost some documents, but we've gained something more valuable. Proof of consciousness of guilt." "But what about the families he's targeting next month?" Carmen asked. We can't let 17 more families lose everything. Marcus stood, decision crystallizing. And we don't wait for the perfect case. Judge, call your FBI contacts. Tell them we have evidence of an imminent crime wave. Helen, can you testify to what you've seen? Helen nodded firmly. After what he did today? Yes, I'll testify to everything. And I'll testify too, Sophie said quietly. I remember everything I saw, everything I heard. Daddy says the truth is important. Judge Morrison smiled grimly. From the mouths of babes, indeed. Very well. We go to war with the army we have. Tomorrow, we file our complaints with the FBI and the district attorney simultaneously. Mr. Hale, you need to secure your assets tonight. Move everything you can out of Edwin's reach. As the meeting broke up, Marcus found himself standing with Sophie and her mother. The little girl who'd started all this with a tug on his coat looked up at him with those serious eyes. Are you scared, Mr. Hale? Marcus considered lying, then decided she deserved honesty. Yes, Sophie, I'm scared. But doing the right thing is often scary. She nodded solemnly. That's what Mama says too, but we're doing it anyway. Yes, Marcus? Sighed, looking at his unlikely team of warriors. We're doing it anyway. The Thompsons lost their dairy farm. Helen read from her notes. 60 acres in the family since 1923. Edwin handled what they thought was a loan modification. Instead, they signed away their deed. The Washingtons, Carmen Martinez added, having joined their investigation. They owned the Soul Food restaurant on Division Street. Gone now. They're living with their daughter in Chicago. Marcus studied the pattern emerging. Look at the properties. They're all in areas slated for development. The new highway extension, the proposed shopping district, the industrial park expansion. Judge Morrison connected the dots on their map. Someone with inside knowledge of city planning is choosing these targets. Properties that seem worthless now, but will triple in value within 5 years. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Marcus peered through the curtain, then relaxed. It's Mrs. Chun from the library. The elderly librarian entered, clutching a folder. Mr. Hale, I heard you were looking into irregularities. My nephew lost his print shop last year. Mr. Grant was his lawyer. Another victim. Another story. Marcus was adding it to their board when his phone rang. Helen's name on the screen, though she was supposed to be at work. They know. Helen's voice was panicked. Edwin knows something. He's shredding documents, telling me to cancel all his appointments. Mr. Hale, I think you need to... The line went dead. Helen, Marcus grabbed his keys. Judge, call 911. Something's happened. Sophie, who'd been quietly drawing at the kitchen table, suddenly spoke up. Mrs. Winters parks in the back lot. She showed me her car once. It has a teddy bear hanging from the mirror for her daughter. I'll go, Carmen said. Just a concerned friend checking on her. Less suspicious than you, Mr. Hale. 20 agonizing minutes later, Carmen called. Helen's car is here, but she's not. Security says she left suddenly, said she was sick. But Mr. Hale, there's blood on her car door handle. Judge Morrison was already dialing his FBI contact. We need protection for our witness. Now, the next hours blurred together. Police reports, FBI involvement, frantic searching. Then, at midnight, Helen called from a gas station payphone. I'm okay, she sobbed. I'm sorry I scared you. When I realized Edwin was destroying evidence, I tried to grab what I could. He caught me, said he knew I'd been talking to you, Mr. Hale. He grabbed my arm, twisted it, threatened Emma. I ran. Where are you? Marcus demanded. Yorkville truck stop. I'm scared to go home. He said he has people watching Emma's school. Stay there. We're coming. The rescue operation was swift. Judge Morrison's FBI contacts provided immediate protection, moving Helen and Emma to a safe house. But the damage was done. Edwin was now actively covering his tracks. "We've lost the element of surprise," Judge Morrison said grimly as they regrouped. "He'll destroy everything he can, intimidate witnesses, maybe even flee. Not if we move fast," Marcus countered. "Helen, what documents did you manage to save?" Helen produced a flash drive from her shoe. His correspondence with Thomas Brennan. Plans for something called Project Clean Sweep. Mr. Howell. They're planning to foreclose on 17 more properties next month, including yours. Marcus felt the floor shift beneath him. Mine? But I don't have any mortgages with First National. You do now, Helen said quietly. According to these documents, you took out a $5 million loan 6 months ago. The paperwork is already filed. You've been missing payments. The audacity of it staggered him. While he'd been investigating Edwin had been setting him up for the same fate as the others. The FBI raid on Edwin Grant's office should have been their victory. Marcus watched from across the street as agents carried out boxes of documents, computer hard drives, and filing cabinets. But something felt wrong. Edwin himself was nowhere to be seen, and his car wasn't in its usual spot. Agent Sarah Chun, Judge Morrison's contact, approached Marcus with a grim expression. He's gone. Cleared out his personal office sometime last night. We got records, but he knew you were coming, Marcus finished. Someone tipped him off. Agent Chun's jaw tightened. This operation was need to know. Only a handful of people knew about the timing. Back at the war room, the team assembled with heavy hearts. The evidence seized would help, but without Edwin in custody, victims remained vulnerable. Helen sat, hunched in her chair, Emma asleep in her lap after another night in the safe house. There's something else, Agent Chun said, producing a letter found in Edwin's desk. This changes the scope of our investigation significantly. Marcus read aloud. Edwin Phase 3 proceeds as planned. Your performance has exceeded expectations. Once Project Clean Sweep is complete, our investors will control the entire development corridor. Your accounts in Georgetown await. Will be? Helen looked puzzled. I don't know any W.B. in Edwin's contacts. Sophie, who'd been coloring, quietly looked up. William Brennan. Thomas Brennan's father. He visited Mr. Grant's office once. They looked at big maps with lots of colored pins. Judge Morrison's face went white. William Brennan, former state senator, current chairman of Midwest Development Consortium. If he's involved, this isn't just local corruption, Agent Chun finished. This is a coordinated effort to steal an entire town's prime real estate for a massive development project. Marcus felt the pieces clicking into place. The highway extension, the industrial park, the shopping district, all projects pushed by. Politicians connected to Brennan. They weren't just stealing properties. They were reshaping the entire county for profit. The foreclosures create blight, Judge Morrison explained, his legal mind parsing the scheme. Property values drop, driving out remaining owners. The consortium swoops in, buying everything cheap through shell companies. Then they announce the development projects they've been planning all along, and values skyrocket. It's brilliant, Helen said bitterly. Evil, but brilliant. Edwin wasn't the mastermind. He was just their legal instrument. A knock interrupted them. Carmen answered, returning with a manila envelope. This was left on the porch. No postmark. Inside was a single sheet. Back off or the girl talks to no one. Ever. Sophie's picture was attached, taken outside her school. Yesterday, Carmen pulled her daughter close, terror in her eyes. They're threatening my baby. No, Agent Chun said firmly. They're showing desperation. Threatening a federal witness, especially a child, just added kidnapping conspiracy to their charges. She immediately called for additional protection details. But Marcus noticed Sophie hadn't reacted with fear. The 8-year-old was studying the photo intently. "That's not my regular school uniform," Sophie said. "That's my Tuesday art class shirt. And look," she pointed to a barely visible reflection in a car window. "That's Mr. Grant's assistant, Doug. He has a spider tattoo on his hand." Even in hiding, Edwin was making mistakes. The photo led them to Doug Morrison, no relation to the judge, who folded quickly under FBI interrogation. His confession revealed the conspiracy's full scope. 63 properties targeted, 17 million in planned theft, and a network reaching into state government. "But there's more," Doug stammered, trying to bargain. "The bank president, Thomas Brennan, he's been skimming from the conspiracy. His father doesn't know. Edwin found out and has been blackmailing him. That's why Tom's been so helpful with the foreclosures." A conspiracy within a conspiracy. Agent Shun smiled grimly. "Dissension in the ranks? We can use this." Judge Morrison leaned forward. "If Thomas Brennan thinks Edwin has fled and left him exposed, he might cooperate to save himself. Or," Marcus added, thinking like the developer he was, "we make him think his father has discovered his skimming." Fear of William Brennan might be stronger than fear of prosecution. Agent Shun nodded. "I'll need a warrant for Thomas Brennan." "Judge Morrison, your insights would be valuable in crafting the approach." As plans took shape, Marcus watched Sophie return to her coloring, seemingly unperturbed by the threat against her. Her courage humbled him. This little girl was perfect. Memory had stood up to powerful men who destroyed her family. The least he could do was see it through. "Mr. Hall," Sophie said suddenly, "I just remembered something else. When Mr. Grant and that Doug were talking last week, they mentioned the judge, but they weren't talking about Judge Morrison. They said the judge wants his cut by Friday. I think there's another judge involved. Another layer of corruption." Marcus met Agent Shun's eyes, seeing his own determination reflected there. "How deep does this go?" Helen whispered. "Deep enough," Judge Morrison said, his voice steel. "But every criminal conspiracy has one weakness: criminals can't trust each other. We found the crack. Now we exploit it." The war for Millbrook County had become something larger a battle against systematic corruption reaching to the state capital. But with each revelation, their resolve strengthened. They would expose it all, no matter how deep the rot went. The Fairmont Hotel's presidential suite had been transformed into an FBI command center. Agent Shun had pulled resources from 3 field offices, recognizing they were about to take down a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of state government. Marcus stood before a wall of surveillance photos, watching technicians prepare recording equipment. "Thomas Brennan agreed to meet," Agent Shun announced. "He's scared. Edwin's disappearance has him panicked about being the fall guy." "What's our play?" Marcus asked. "You're going to offer to buy him out," Shun explained. "A legitimate business meeting to discuss acquiring First National's troubled assets." Judge Morrison suggested it. "Brennan knows your reputation. Will believe you're trying to profit from the chaos." Helen, working with FBI analysts, had prepared a briefcase of documents. "These show you're interested in the foreclosed properties. But the real purpose is this." She held up a slim recording device. "Latest FBI tech. Undetectable, crystal clear audio. And if he doesn't talk?" Judge Morrison, serving as legal advisor, interjected. "He will. Chun's team has been feeding him carefully crafted intelligence. He believes his father discovered the skimming, thinks Edwin documented everything before fleeing. He's desperate for allies. Sophie and her mother were in protective custody 3 states away, but the girl had left them one more gift: a detailed drawing of every person she'd seen in Edwin's office, including one they just identified as Judge Harold Fitzgerald, the corrupt jurist in their conspiracy. "Fitzgerald's the key," Shun explained. "He's been rubber stamping foreclosures, sealing records, protecting the conspiracy from legal challenges. But he's also arrogant. While Edwin ran, Fitzgerald still on the bench, believing he's untouchable. Marcus studied the plan. In 2 hours, he'd meet Thomas Brennan for lunch. FBI agents would be at nearby tables in the kitchen, manning surveillance vans outside. If Brennan revealed the conspiracy's structure, they'd have probable cause for simultaneous raids across the state. "What about Edwin?" Marcus asked. "Any leads?" "Airport security footage shows him boarding a flight to Miami 4 days ago," Chun replied. "But he never showed up for his connecting flight to the Caymans. He's gone to ground." Helen spoke up from her workstation. "I've been thinking about that. Edwin's paranoid but predictable. He always had backup plans, safe houses. There's a cabin his grandfather's place in Wisconsin. He mentioned it once, said it was perfect for disappearing if needed." Chun immediately dispatched a team to investigate. Meanwhile, Marcus prepared for his performance, coached by undercover agents who'd run similar operations. "Remember," Chun instructed, "you're a businessman seeing opportunity. Let him think he's using you. Desperate people make mistakes." Cut. Noon, Marcus entered the Fairmont's restaurant, every sense heightened. Thomas Brennan sat in a corner booth, sweating despite the air conditioning. The bank president looked like he'd aged a decade in a weak, hollow eyes, trembling hands, the look of a man watching his world collapse. "Marcus," Brennan stood, attempting his usual smooth demeanor. "Thank you for meeting. These are difficult times." Marcus sat, activating the recorder with a subtle touch. "Difficult times create opportunities, Tom. I understand you have some assets you need to liquidate quickly." Brennan's eyes darted around the restaurant. "It's more complicated than that. Edwin's disappearance has created exposure. My father—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "My father has discovered certain irregularities." "Irregularities?" Marcus kept his tone neutral, businessman to businessman. "Edwin was supposed to handle everything cleanly," Brennan's words tumbled out. "The foreclosures, the transfers, keeping the profits hidden until the development project was announced. But he got greedy, started skimming. When I confronted him, he said he had insurance documents proving I'd diverted funds from the conspiracy." "Conspiracy?" Marcus leaned forward, projecting concern rather than satisfaction. "You don't understand the scope," Brennan laughed bitterly. "My father, Judge Fitzgerald, half the zoning commission, State Senator's Project Clean Sweep was going to net over $50 million in property value increases. All legal on paper, just aggressive foreclosures and smart development, but not legal in reality?" Brennan's facade cracked completely. Forged documents, bribed officials, fabricated defaults. Edwin handled the dirty work while we provided cover. But it was brilliant, Marcus. We were rebuilding Millbrook County, creating a development corridor that would transform the region. At the cost of destroying families. Marcus couldn't keep the edge from his voice. "Collateral damage," Brennan dismissed. "Progress requires sacrifice. But now Edwin's gone, probably talking to the feds, and I'm left exposed. That's why I need your help." Marcus played his role. "What kind of help?" "Buy the properties through a legitimate transaction." "I'll sell them at a loss, but it creates a paper trail showing normal business dealings. You get prime real estate cheap. I get clean documentation before investigators dig too deep." "And your father?" Fear flashed across Brennan's face. "He can't know about my skimming. He Jew don't cross William Brennan. Edwin knew that, used it against me. Said if I didn't cooperate fully, he'd tell my father about the million I redirected to personal accounts. Where's Edwin now?" "I don't know." Brennan's voice rose, drawing glances. "He called 3 days ago, said the FBI was coming, then vanished. Left me holding everything while he ran with millions in offshore accounts." Marcus glanced at his water glass, the signal. Within seconds, Agent Chun appeared at their table. "Thomas Brennan, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, racketeering, and corruption of public officials." Brennan's face went white, then red. "You set me up." Understanding dawned. You're working with them. As agents led Brennan away, Marcus felt a grim satisfaction. One conspirator down, but the bigger fish remained. Chun's phone buzzed. The Wisconsin team had found Edwin's cabin, but it was empty. He'd been there recently, though, leaving behind evidence of his next move. He's not running, Chun said, studying the report. He's planning something. Documents at the cabin show he's been in contact with William Brennan, offering to testify against everyone else in exchange for protection. The final gambit, Edwin trying to flip the board, positioning himself as a witness rather than perpetrator. But he'd underestimated one thing. Sophie, Marcus said. Her testimony places Edwin at the center of everything. A child's perfect memory against a corrupt lawyer's lies. Chun nodded. Time to end this. We have Brennan's confession. Enough for warrants on everyone. Tomorrow morning, we move. The climax was approaching. After weeks of investigation, the moment of reckoning was at hand. Dawn broke gray and cold over Millbrook County as FBI agents took position. Operation Clean Sweep, that appropriated the conspirators' own name, would hit 17 locations simultaneously. Marcus stood with Agent Chun in the Mobile Command unit, watching feeds from multiple teams. Judge Fitzgerald's residence secured, came the first report. The corrupt judge, caught in his pajamas, blustered about judicial immunity until agents showed him Thomas Brennan's recorded confession. State Senator Phillips in custody. Another conspirator fell. Zoning commissioners detained. But the primary target remained elusive. William Brennan's mansion stood empty, his bed unslept in. Then, an urgent call from the surveillance team. We've got movement at the old courthouse. William Brennan just entered with Sir. Edwin Grant is with him. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Edwin had surfaced, meeting with the conspiracy's architect in the very building where justice was supposed to live. They're in courtroom 3, the surveillance team reported. Audio coming online now. Through crackling speakers, they heard William Brennan's cultured voice. Your disappearing act nearly ruined everything. Edwin. Thomas cracked, sang like a canary. I had to run. Edwin's familiar smooth tone responded. The FBI was closing in, but I have a solution. We blame everything on Thomas and Fitzgerald. Paint them as rogue actors who corrupted your noble development vision. And the evidence? Destroyed what I could. The rest points to them, not us. I've prepared documents showing you were deceived, that you're actually a victim of your son's embezzlement. Even now, Marcus marveled at Edwin's audacity, throwing his own conspirators under the bus to save himself and the biggest fish. What about Hale and his little group? Brennan asked. A disgruntled businessman and a confused child. Without Thomas's bank records and Fitzgerald's court documents, their case falls apart. Sophie Martinez is 8 years old. Any decent lawyer can discredit her testimony. Agent Chun looked at Marcus. We've heard enough for conspiracy charges, but a good lawyer could argue entrapment, claim they were discussing hypotheticals. We need more, Marcus agreed. Then an idea. Can you patch me through to their location? Let me talk to Edwin? Chun hesitated, then nodded. It's irregular, but yes. You're still a civilian, not officially part of law enforcement. Marcus took the phone as agents wired him for sound. He dialed Edwin's cell, watching the feed as the lawyer checked his phone, surprise flickering across his face. Marcus? Edwin answered cautiously. Hello, Edwin. I'm downstairs. Why don't we discuss this face-to-face, man-to-man? Unless you're afraid to face someone you've been stealing from for 20 years. On the monitor, they watched Edwin's expression cycle through emotions. Brennan grabbed the phone. Mr. Hall, this is William Brennan. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Why don't you come up? I'm sure we can resolve this like civilized men. Marcus was already moving, agents protesting. But Chun understood. He's giving us probable cause. If they threaten him, try to bribe him, We have them cold. I'm an old man seeking answers, Marcus said, clipping on the wire. Not a threat to anyone. He entered the courthouse he'd helped renovate years ago. Climbed stairs his company had restored. The irony wasn't lost. They'd chosen to meet in the very seat of justice they'd corrupted. Courtroom 3 was dim, morning light filtering through tall windows. William Brennan stood behind the judge's bench like he owned it, which, in a way, he had. Edwin lounged in the prosecutor's chair, still playing the confident counselor. Marcus, Edwin smiled his salesman's smile, you look tired. This crusade of yours has taken a toll. 20 years, Edwin. Marcus kept his voice steady. 20 years I trusted you. We had dinner in each other's homes. You spoke at Margaret's funeral. Something flickered in Edwin's eyes. Guilt? No, Marcus realized. Calculation. Always calculation. Business is business. Edwin shrugged. You've made millions. So what if I took my share? You never even noticed until that brat opened her mouth. That brat has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body. William Brennan interrupted. Gentlemen, please. Mr. Hale, you're a practical man. What's done is done. But the future, that's negotiable. Join us. Your construction expertise, our development vision. We could transform this entire region. With stolen land, built on the ruins of families you've destroyed. Emotional language, Brennan dismissed. Progress requires change. The weak fall, the strong prosper. Darwin's law applied to real estate. Marcus felt rage building but controlled it. Is that what you told yourself when you foreclosed on the Martinez family? When you stole from people? Who trusted you? Enough. Edwin stood. Marcus, you have two choices. Join us, and I'll make your legal problems disappear, yes. I know about the fraudulent loan documents in your name. Or refuse and lose everything. Your reputation, your fortune, probably your freedom, when you're framed for the very crimes you're investigating. You'd frame me? I'd bury you, Edwin said coldly, just like I buried everyone else who got in the way. That Martinez girl, accidents happen to children all the time. Helen Winters? Single mothers are so vulnerable. Judge Morrison? Old men have heart attacks. Marcus had to remind himself that agents were listening, that Edwin was sealing his own fate with every threat. You'd hurt a child? I'd do whatever's necessary. Edwin moved closer. That's the difference between us, Marcus. You build things. I take them. And I'm very, very good at what I do. Actually, Marcus said quietly, you're not. Excuse me? A good criminal doesn't threaten federal witnesses while being recorded. A good lawyer doesn't confess to crimes in a courthouse full of FBI agents. And a good judge of character would have known I'd never betray my community. Edwin's face went white as understanding dawned. Behind him, William Brennan was already moving toward the back exit, but it burst open, agents flooding in. Edwin Grant, William Brennan, you're under arrest, Agent Sean announced. As satisfying a sound as Marcus had ever heard, Edwin made one last desperate play, lunging for Marcus, perhaps thinking a hostage might help. But at 75, Marcus had spent a lifetime hefting beams and hauling materials. He sidestepped, and Edwin crashed into the prosecutor's table he'd so arrogantly occupied as agents cuffed them. William Brennan maintained his aristocratic bearing. You have no idea what you've done. The development this county needs will happen honestly, Marcus interrupted, with respect for the people who live here. Edwin, being led away, turned back. It won't stick. I'll make a deal, testify against everyone else. Good luck with that, Agent Chun smiled. We have Thomas's confession, documents from your cabin, and most importantly, the testimony of an 8-year-old girl with perfect memory who watched you practice forging signatures. The mention of Sophie finally broke Edwin's composure. The smooth-talking lawyer who destroyed dozens of lives. finally understood he'd been brought down by a child's truth and an old man's determination. 3 months later, the courthouse was packed for the sentencing. Marcus sat in the gallery with Helen Winters, who'd started her own paralegal firm specializing in helping fraud victims. Carmen and Roberto Martinez were there, their hardware store restored and reopening next month. Judge Morrison had come out of retirement to serve as a special prosecutor, ensuring every conspirator faced justice. Sophie sat between her parents, no longer the worried girl who tugged Marcus's coat. She'd testified brilliantly, her perfect recall devastating to the defense. When Edwin's lawyer tried to confuse her, she'd simply said, "I remember everything, sir. Would you like me to repeat what you whispered to Mr. Grant during the last recess?" The judge, a clean one, brought in from another district, read the sentences. Edwin Grant, 25 years federal prison. William Brennan, 20 years. Thomas Brennan, 15 years with cooperation. Judge Fitzgerald, 18 years and permanent disbarment. As they led Edwin away, he looked at Marcus with naked hatred. But Marcus felt only pity. All that talent wasted on greed. Outside, in the spring sunshine, Sophie ran up to Marcus. "Mr. Hale, Mama says you're building a new community center where the old library was." "That's right," Marcus smiled. "The Margaret Hale Center for Community Development. We'll help families start businesses, offer legal aid, make sure what happened to your family never happens again. Can I help?" Sophie asked eagerly. "I'm counting on it," Marcus said. "After all, you started all this. You saw the truth when adults were too afraid to look." As the crowd dispersed, Marcus stood on the courthouse steps, looking out at his town. Wounded but healing, betrayed but not broken. At 75, he'd thought his building days were behind him. But Sophie had reminded him that the most important things to build weren't made of concrete and steel. They were made of trust, justice, and the courage to speak truth to power. Even if that truth came from the smallest voice of all. The war for Millbrook County was over. The rebuilding could begin.